Hello. I will begin by saying that this will be an acknowledgement video, but not an apology video. I will acknowledge many things, but apologize for very few. Because the central fact in all of this is that my case is based on the intentional distortion of ordinary truths and the extreme magnification of horrible lies, all to fuel an orchestrated mass of hate in such excess that no human being should ever have to experience in their lifetime. The so-called evidence of my case is based on two parts. Firstly, things that I have said and shared being purposefully misconstrued beyond all reasonable degrees in order to corrupt my image, and secondly, the malignant, intentionally made-up lies being largely spread about me in order to vilify my personhood as a whole. In this video, I will dispute all of the allegations which are false and shed light on those that hold some truth. I'll bring attention to the many things which I am expected to apologize for, but which I will not, but also the few for which I will. To do this, I'll be quoting and deconstructing this document as well as parts of this video so that I can acknowledge all of their fallacies and gaps as well as their partial and whole truths. Point by point, claim by claim. This video will be divided into 10 parts. If you are here for the truth, then let's begin. If you're only here having already made up your mind that I am a problematic creator and an irredeemably bad person without you even needing the truth itself, then you are still welcome to try and listen as well. But now with the chance provided to think critically, not for me, not against them, but for yourself. So because the truth is mine and mine alone, I'm going to take control of this narrative now, okay? Okay. To begin with, all 4 claims made in this document's opening paragraph alone are false. Firstly, of all 14,000 comments made under my last video on TikTok, likely even more than that, there was not a single comment made in a respectful manner. I have seen this, my manager has seen this, and most notably, you all have seen this, the majority of you having joyfully participated in it. Secondly, I have not been actively deleting comments, nor have or will I ever. In the several days of my leave from TikTok, I couldn't possibly have done that. For all of those days, I was hospitalized into the psych ward after an attempt, and so was left without a phone, and after some days discharged, going on to live my life, trying to compose myself beneath moment-by-moment anxiety attacks and day-by-day harassment. I allowed for all comments to exist and thrive as they were written, just about all of which were bullying and hate speech. That said, my comment filtering was set to strict under all 3 categories to prevent the singularly most hateful comments from passing through, because as I said in the video, I would read every single comment made constructively, but not those purely out of hate that serve no productive purpose whatsoever. Thirdly, I locked my Facebook profile not because I was in fear of being exposed even more, but because each day for months now, people were very actively taking my videos, photos, and words posted from there so that they could blatantly impersonate me across platforms, dig for extremely personal information like my name, the names of my family, my friends, or where we live, and most apparently incriminate me by taking my posts out of their very ordinary contexts to contort and make them as scandalous as conceivably possible. And fourthly, I changed my profile picture because I felt like it. The last of these 3 were very mild decisions, but were still heavily weaponized against me to make me look defensive and afraid, when really I was being rightfully protective of my privacy and mental well-being, while people were diligently trying to destroy them through doxing, mocking, absolute disinformation, and non-contextual exaggeration. To continue, it was claimed in the video that I like to block people who give me criticism and label it as hating, and that I only acknowledge comments that blatantly kiss my ass. To calmly repeat, I was hospitalized into the psych ward the day after posting that video, after having attempted to take my own life during a severe anxiety attack from the endless harassment. The only comments that I was able to see and react to before then were the ones that came initially, which were positive and kind. And to state a fact simply, I have never once blocked the people who gave me criticism, nor labeled them as haters. I have always made an active effort to not even acknowledge the existences of their accounts. comments. I have only blocked those that consistently made intentionally false accusations and that consistently bullied me in my comments. And lastly, as far as I can vividly recall, I have never once labeled anyone a hater. These decisions of mine were deliberate because I have neither ever wanted to be closed off to real criticism, nor have I ever wanted to label people so recklessly, as others very often like to do to me. I have composedly called people goblin toddlers once, but that singular phrase is not even remotely comparable to the multiple things that I have been labeled, and all of the explicit bullying across platforms in full display. With all of that said, I'll begin now with the most egregious of all false claims. The most disgusting claim made about me is that I support and glorify incest. I cannot stress this enough. That is completely false. Now, where did this come from? Well, my Facebook posts about Kasugano Sora that were selectively taken out of context, edited, and twisted into claims beyond recognition, with new, unrelated context. These images were attached in the document as supposed evidence, all while there has never been a single indication through my actual posts that I support whatever the fuck this is. The thing is, if you have to alter and manipulate details to an extent this bizarre and dishonest, then that isn't evidence, that's deception. I have never posted these images, as is clear and evident with their disconnect from my own profile at all. I will say firmly now that I am very proud to openly resonate with the visual characteristics of Kasugano Sora. She is a beautifully designed character, and cosplaying as her means dressing in Shiro Lolita, an appropriate and harmless fashion. It reflects her character's uniquely delicate and graceful aesthetic, detached from any and all questionable aspects of her story itself. This subculture focuses on softness and elegance, making it a valid artistic choice. As long as the cosplay is done tastefully and respectfully, as is done with characters like Aiko Tanaka from Oyasumi Punpun or Saya of Sai no Uta, it remains a recognition of aesthetic appeal and not an endorsement of her narrative themes. It was claimed in the video that for me to want to cosplay as an East Asian girl, as a Southeast Asian woman, is very fucking weird, but that alone is a very unreasonably misguided thing to say, because it renders all non-East Asian cosplayers, which is the tremendous majority of the community, as being weird for trying to cosplay as any anime character. It's like very conclusively saying that black and brown people should never cosplay at all. To reinforce my argument, several women in China, Japan, Taiwan, Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, and in the Philippines cosplay as Kasugano Sora, and so unless anyone can give any valid reason as to why I, as a Filipino woman, can't do the same, then the allegation of me supporting incest holds no weight. Let's move on. Now let's break this statement down, because all four claims made in it are, once again, consecutively false. And there is one semantic element in particular that gives away its purely ill intent in full display. That element being, when you look hard enough. Or in other words, if you reach far enough into your line of sight to see what things are expected of you to see. That I am acting like a child to bait pedophiles, and that I confirmed this because a comment suggesting I am a made me laugh. That is a lot of micro-allegations all at once. Now to start with, this screenshot in particular, claimed to be evidence, is in actuality an interaction between me and my closest friend, and this exchange in particular is one of many inside jokes we have to poke fun at me occasionally being accused of this to begin with. Now, is it a weird joke? Yes, oh my gosh, absolutely. But does that warrant me being comparable to a subhuman Hitler? No. If friends are allowed to have weird inside jokes among each other, then why must it be so tremendously horrible that they exist among me and my own? I will not apologize for being weird with my best friend when this has made no substantial impact whatsoever on anybody besides ourselves for shits and giggles. This isn't about baiting anyone, let alone disgusting men. This is about people on the internet making assumptions based on their own biases because of being deprived of the truthful context Second of all, let's discuss my appearance and my behavior, particularly in these two videos. I am a 146 centimeter, 19-year-old Filipino woman. My height, my facial features, these are just facts of my being. This is how I naturally look. I'm not pretending to look younger when I just happen to have neotenous features, and in these videos I just happen to be extraordinarily happy. This is quite simply Filipino genetics and being as bubbly as is performatively possible. That said, there is a subset of points I'd like to reflect on with regards to this allegation, in particular having to do with the style in which I edit my face. The aesthetic subculture now recognized in niche online spaces as Cyberdoll was not coined by me, but it did admittedly begin with, and was well augmented by, the nature of my content and its influence within what was initially a Southeast Asian audience. Though this wasn't included in the document as an allegation, I will stand to propose it myself now as a hypothetical claim that to modify yourself into a cyberdoll reinforces in Southeast Asian women a subconscious self-infantilization and a deeply shame-bound racial self-loathing. So because I think this will be an interesting decision, I will now dispute this argument that I constructed on my own accord against my editing. The fact is that the way in which I edit myself is done as an expressive means of self-porcelainification, or making myself look like the bone-jointed dolls most popularized across Pinterest and xiaohongshu. If you observed this issue through the lens of my actual intent, then you would see it. I cannot stress enough that I do not edit myself as a means to make myself look like an infantilized East Asian young girl, nor do I do it because I have a deep, malignant hatred for myself, as I've heard some people claim, and as I know many people believe. In order to dispute the two claims in this hypothetical, I will quote myself from excerpts in an interview that I had last month with an essayist. In critique of a comment that I got once, I said that some people find it disorienting or threatening that I don't tie visual authenticity into my little web persona. The harassment that I receive daily is interesting to me because I see so well how generally people can't stand when a girl or woman uses her digital presence as an experiment and not as an absolute reflection of herself. Instead, editing is always collectively reduced to being something solely based within insecurity and disingenuousness, because people cannot stand nor comprehend how others can just so easily reject that, do it on such a large scale for fun, all with virtuousness and morality never being fundamental or even relevant. The thing is, as I wrote afterwards, I think that editing to an extent this deliberate indicates, almost beautifully, that it is rarely ever consequent to insecurity, self-hatred, or mental illness. Most of the girls and women who do it like and love themselves perfectly well, as I do. When deconstructed objectively, it's closely equivalent to VTubing, makeup, and illustration. And so for all of that, it's pretty cool. This really isn't denial or an excuse. From where I see things, it's a deeply radical, post-authenticity, late-stage cyber era where the appeal is in the honesty along the hyperfake. And to quote one of the most recent things I had written at the time, the fact of all of this is that what is already beautiful can be made into perfection, and that's the whole core of why people like me and people on xiaohongshu edit themselves so much. People, typically of the global west, are kind of disorienting to me for how they refuse to be able to just grasp that conceptually. Their understanding of this might always remain limited to the reasoning of mental illness and self-loathing, because their own cultures prevent them so deeply from exploring visual excess and hyper-artificiality as art, and how it's done in East Asia, and how it's being done now by people like me. To make my point in this tangent clear, it is necessary to say that this is what the average East Asian woman looks like. So is this, so is this, so is this, and so is this. These hypothetical women could modify themselves extensively with makeup and cosmetic procedures, and no one would bat an eye, nor should they. What I do is modify myself almost identically, but through a cyber means, and only to the extent that is surgically possible for me. The accusation that I pretend to be or to pass as East Asian is one that is as absurd as it is ill-informed, because it reduces East Asian women to looking solely like bone-jointed dolls, or like young children, or like K-pop idols, when really they just look like average human beings like me. In other words, the perpetuation of a harmful racial stereotype is not an individualistic attribute of my actions, nor of a defect in my conscience. It is instead and arguably an attribute of the collective consciousness outside of myself. Basically, the call is coming from inside the house, but the house not being my own. I believe that this cognitive reduction exists solely to be weaponized against Southeast Asian girls and women, who they themselves are victims to the debilitating weight of having to conform to an aesthetic ideal just to feel a semblance of being conventionally beautiful. And as it happens, it is in China where there is observably the largest aesthetic demonstration of women trying to look like hyper-perfected porcelain and bone-jointed dolls in the way that they naturally do not. I state this to say that what I do has arguably never been any different than what they do, other than measurably. What is true is that the extent to which I must edit myself in order to resemble dolls is somewhat larger than the lesser extent to which East Asian women have to. But what is equally true is that that does not mean that my efforts to dollify myself become any less of a valid artistic choice, nor does it become an attempt to come closer in proximity to a stereotyped version of a racial group that isn't my own. In other words, it really is just self-dollification, not East Asian fishing, and that is as deep as it gets. Now, third of all, before I enter the Cyberdoll tangent, there is the case of the uniforms, particularly the seifuku and the daisofuku. Let's begin with the daisofuku, or the Japanese gym uniform. This was claimed in the document to be worn in both Japan and China, but actually it belongs only to Japan. Now, this distinction is a key point to make because it clearly indicates that Chinese girls and women who wear it today, as many of them evidently do, are doing so in appreciation of a style and fashion which are foreign to their own, which thereby demonstrates that if they, as a whole different racial and cultural group, can appreciate it, then there is no reason at all why Southeast Asian girls, who themselves are still schoolgirls, cannot do the same. Now let's talk about the next uniform, the seifuku, or the Japanese sailor uniform, and additionally, all of my uniform sets in general. This is true, I do wear school uniforms in many of my videos, and I will say now that there's objectively nothing even remotely wrong with that. And there's no better argument on my part to be made here other than to showcase for you all the countless examples of what is called JK fashion. JK being short for Joshi Gokosei, and Joshi Gokosei meaning female high school student, that which I am. I have been openly dressing in this style since I was at least 16, and I have proudly continued to dress this way now nearing the age of 20. And I say this because it is a well and widely known fact that this fashion subculture exists predominantly throughout all of East and Southeast Asia among girls and women, teenagers and legal adults, vastly seen across Pinterest, Xiaohongshu, and Instagram. But it just so happens that people have completely chosen to disregard that fact because to do so has made it convenient to prove that I am baiting pedophiles. But to explicitly agree that my favorite style of dressing up is proof of pedobaiting is to also tangentially agree that all of these other grown women dressing up in the same way are baiting pedophiles themselves, as if there is no other conceivable reason why they would dress like this, such as, once again, an appreciation of aesthetic appeal. All of this is to say that the existence of this entirely harmless subculture has been completely swept under the rug and turned a collective blind eye to, because that makes it tremendously easier for people to believe it when they are told that I am trying to attract predators. So with all of that, the allegation that I am trying to bait pedophiles also holds no weight whatsoever. Now this is the first of all things that I intend to apologize for, but before I go on to do so, I think it's crucial that I make a stand in defense of Twitter, even if they probably fucking despise me, all of them. Saying that it is just a community of people actively promoting eating disorders is like saying that a crisis hotline is a place where people encourage suffering because they talk about pain. It's like saying that rehab centers glorify addiction because they're full of addicts talking about drugs, and it's like saying that therapy groups normalize mental illness because people talk about their symptoms. That deliberately brief definition is very frequently used as a smear tactic to reduce eating to Twitter to being nothing more than an online space where people enable each other to get sicker. But having been there intermittently between the ages of 15 and 18, I know well, in the ways that outsiders wouldn't know, that more than anything, it's a place where people just aren't at a stage where they're ready to recover yet, just as people in rehab struggle with relapses. The space itself doesn't exist purely to exacerbate mental illness. It's most often just a large-scale reflection of where its users are mentally. It's a place where they openly discuss their disordered thoughts, but that doesn't mean they're trying to promote them. Many are simply looking for understanding in a place where they don't feel judged. It's a place where they process the experience of having a debilitating mental disorder. Regardless of whether that's an unhealthy collective coping mechanism or not, the aforementioned definition was set in place to make a community that I have associated with look worse than it actually is as a whole. But with all of that said, I do apologize for having contributed to the subset of ED Twitter that does promote thinspo. I will never deny that truth. This absolutely was my account. I absolutely did post inspo threads. I did make these implicitly disordered posts on my Facebook, and I did make this joke bringing attention to this side of ED Twitter. And for all of that, I am sorry. I take full responsibility for having done these things, and I will not try to defend them with the fact that I have recurrently been through very low points psychologically with my now diagnosed mild anorexia nervosa. Truly again, I am sorry for these things. That said, it is only right on my part to say that the claim that I have been active there as recently as February 2025 is completely false, as is apparent because the document provided no evidence of this whatsoever. The fact is that my last explicit activity on Twitter was in August of last year, or 7 whole months ago, when I posted that Twitter intro wishing for belonging. The only reason they claimed this is because I lightheartedly responded using this account to an ordinary tweet about me and my editing with hehe some months ago. Since August, I was never again actively participating in the community. Now, there isn't much of an argument to be made against this, not because I don't know how to defend myself for it, but because the allegation I am expected to acknowledge here holds no weight by default. To take a step back and look at this objectively, the people responsible for this document basically investigated and virtually excavated my entire Facebook profile to the bone. And yet, of the alleged multiple concerning things sexualizing men, these 2 shared posts were the only fragments of what resemble evidence that they could find. And in my opinion, that says everything. And it screams desperate to portray me as some kind of a persistently disgusting, unreasonably lustful sex freak over nerdy men with glasses. As easy as it would be for me to say, God forbid an adult woman thirsts over handsome men, it isn't in fact as if I won't apologize for having shared one of these posts. I am sorry for taking so lightheartedly that glasses boys are for sex. It is an oddly phrased joke, and afterward I did think about why it was. That said, I will not apologize for finding humor in the implication that nerdy guys are sexually attractive. That is not even a remotely controversial or problematic opinion. Next of all, there is this argument regarding this, that this was ultimately still inappropriate of me because, as has been claimed by some, the majority of my Facebook friends were first of all, minors, and second of all, minors who should never be exposed to vulgarity of this extent. But in actuality, there are 3 facts that disprove this easily. Firstly, majority of my friends were not minors, but were in fact between the ages of 18 and 35. Secondly, the rest of them were underage people who added me on their own accord, and could have at any moment unfriended me if these 2, and I repeat, 2 shared posts made them uncomfortable. And thirdly, many of those underage mutuals of mine were entirely and openly comfortable with things as extreme as gore, bondage, self-harm, eating disorders, traumacore, and all other similar variants of my outrageously sickening behavior. I will say firmly now that I do find nerdy men in glasses very attractive, but I will not apologize for that, and I will not be deemed a pervert because I shared 2 posts which I have since then reflected on. First of all, to begin with this allegation, I implore you all kindly to look through any one of my comment sections from my earliest TikTok video all the way up to my latest. It is the single most observable fact that the most frequently asked question in all of these comments is as to what race I am, and it is the single most evident fact that I have willfully and happily responded to each and every one of those comments that I am fully Filipino, particularly Tagalog and Ilocano. There is simply no way that anyone can deny this. It is also the most repeatedly asked question on all of my live sessions on TikTok, and I have routinely only ever responded with enthusiasm that I am fully Filipino. Anyone who has ever been a viewer of my lives would know this well. It is also a well-known fact that Filipino has been in my bio since the beginning of my TikTok. Second of all, if I am racist towards my own race, then what the fuck is this? There is not a single piece of true evidence of me stating something even remotely resembling hate, except for these ones, so let's deconstruct them. Firstly, the words being purposefully dismissed here are the words phenotype of, and this is a key detail to point out because the dismissal of them is what caused this statement to spiral out of control, all while it was never written to be derogatory. Phenotype very simply just refers to a trait that is observable, and phenotype of Filipinos refers only to the Filipinos themselves, with the observable trait of being cruel because they are uninformed. Therefore, brains the size of a cashew refers only to that subset of willfully ignorant, relentlessly inhumane people alone, not my entire fucking racial and ethnic group. And I posted this as a reflection of my lived experience, of my words being misconstrued intentionally so often throughout my life by other Filipinos to render me as someone hostile, hateful, discriminatory, bigoted, and condescending towards them. If you took personal offense to this statement, I implore you to think of exactly why that is, and why you may have assumed that I am referring to you. That said, I will be more discerning from here on of the ways in which I construct my thoughts and deliver my sentences. If I ever do make posts again, I will be more sensitive so that my reflections are more empathetic and so that misinterpretation becomes impossible. But I will not apologize for the misinterpretation of this thought itself. Secondly, it is not a controversial opinion to advocate for being healthy, so I will not apologize for that, but I am sorry for how derogatory this post actually was towards another subset of people who buy luxury things because they want to, despite being unhealthy. Thirdly, this was a satirical spin on the quote, "It costs nothing to be kind and spread love," which I had frequently reshared on my Facebook, but that these people intentionally didn't show you, as can be seen in the original document. The cat in this image was deliberately cropped out and replaced with a completely black overlay to purposefully omit its satirical overtone, to make it look like a genuinely and plainly hateful statement. Fourthly, the argument being made here is that I am judging people's ability in trying to speak Japanese, which ironically is what is being ruthlessly done to me, and it is also claimed that I have no right to do so because I am fully Filipino. To dispute this briefly, I will say that this is an argument which is completely irrelevant to my actual statement, and it makes no sense whatsoever. To make clear what I actually said, if you are going to use ChatGPT to construct sentences and then read them out for videos, then you should at least be respectful of the language's nuances if your objective is to seem as if you can speak it, so that you don't risk embarrassing yourself among those who are fluent in it. That is not me criticizing people's ability in trying to speak Japanese. That is me criticizing people for using generative AI, which they objectively shouldn't for this purpose, to seem as if they know Japanese when they do not. And this is a mild statement which anyone from any racial group can validly make. It is a commentary on techno-orientalism in disrespect of true language acquisition, and it is not a hate piece towards people trying to learn or speak Japanese. The allegation of me spreading hate speech is not a testament to how I am clearly unwell and mentally unstable, as I have seen some people claim because they are uninformed. This allegation, among all others, is the single most shameless display of manipulative, selective editing and context omission. Things that I have said and photos I have posted were removed from their original context, and by highlighting isolated moments and misrepresenting the intent behind my statements, I was portrayed in a disproportionately negative light. It was a tactic that involves cherry-picking parts of my words as pieces of evidence while leaving out crucial context that would have otherwise explained and mitigated them, and that is a disgusting thing to do. This screenshot attached in the document stands with a blatant mistranslation of what was said in the actual video. The person beside me, who was my mom and not my sister, very clearly said, "Mukha ka daw Japanese, uy malaglag ka." That was right after we'd just bought karyoka from a vendor in UP who was, with good intention, pointing out that I looked Japanese. To which I happily responded, just as I do everywhere online, "Ay hindi po, pure Filipino lang po ako. Tagalog si mama, tas Ilocano si papa." Something along those lines. No, exactly those lines. Exactly those lines. And then the "uy baka malaglag ka" part was said because I was recording with my phone while walking closely at the edge of a sidewalk. I'm so sorry, but I do find it at least a little bit funny that I have to dispute and explain something like this. But with that said, I have heard that there's this audio circulating very widely around of me speaking Japanese, and I can only really imagine the degree to which it's being used to mock me right now. But it does interest me, so let's deconstruct it. In the language learning methodologies called All Japanese All the Time and Refold, there's this technique called shadowing, which is used to improve pronunciation, listening comprehension, and fluency in a target language by mimicking native speech in real time. It involves listening to a native speaker and repeating what they say as quickly and accurately as possible with minimal delay. This means you are shadowing the speaker, which in this case for me was a woman from Tearisahause, almost like an echo. The goal is to train your brain to process the language at a natural pace while improving your accent, rhythm, and intonation. There is no question as to whether that old audio was cringe or not. It probably was. But the reason for which people are bullying me so brutally for it is fundamentally as neglectful of context as it is needlessly cruel. The facts are that I am terrible at Tagalog as I am terrible at Ilocano, and, as I am with such apparent importance, terrible at Japanese. Though I am truthfully multilingual, I am only fluent in English, and people who have watched my content know that I speak Tagalog, Ilocano, and Japanese very rarely, because I know that I speak each of them with very low proficiency. And so it's just so strange to me exactly why people have decided to single out only my low fluency in Japanese, after I have said multiple times in comments and in lives that I can only speak it to a basic elementary conversational level. It's strange to me that no one cares I don't speak Tagalog or Ilocano very well, but all of a sudden everybody seems to care, look down upon, and so brutally dehumanize me simply for how I don't speak Japanese very well as a language learner. Bullying to this extent would never be warranted with any other language learner. It has simply been selectively weaponized against me and me alone because of a mass intent to characterize me as some kind of a desperate Japanophile. I understand that the argument can be made that there has just been too much of a consistent pattern of my conformity to aspects of Japanese culture. But again, my previous assertions with regards to dobaiting, the Cyberdoll, the uniforms, dispute all of this seamlessly. Two people, and I repeat, two people commissioned me for this, both of whom were my friends, one of whom came up to me because they really appreciated it conceptually, and one of whom came up to me for it for shits and giggles. Now, though no allegation was made with regards to this screenshot, and so it was simply categorized as weird, I will do the work myself to articulate a hypothetical argument for them based on why they must find it weird. That argument being that it destructively reinforces what I do, which is symptomatic to my diagnosed body dysmorphic disorder, upon other people. So now I will dispute this. The only people who could ever approach me for this are those who are willfully appreciative of it, in the way that people were openly participative in the Cyberdoll community. This is weird, but it is not harmful. It was accessible only to those who were interested in it, and neither of them developed a debilitating insecurity in themselves as consequence. The last things I would like to add are that, firstly, if there are any old or new screenshots left unacknowledged from this video, as in of me inciting hate or saying anything weird, then all I have to say about this is that when you see any alleged proof of me saying or doing something wrong, but there just so happens to be no verifiable screen recorded evidence of it being clicked and leading directly to my official profiles on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Xiaohongshu, and Facebook, then it is by all means false and edited. This has happened to a remarkably concerning extent with me, which is almost entirely why we're all here, and it will continue to happen. So please just be discerning and critical of anything you see that puts me in a shockingly bad light, and that casts any other creator in a similar light in general. These things always exist and circulate for a reason, so please just always question first whether that reason must be attributed to the person in question or the people employing the accusation themselves. Secondly, to anybody who has read any insults about me based purely on rumors that demean who I am, please have empathy for a person who has done nothing so wrong that it warrants weeks and weeks of death threats, violent bullying for her appearance, and harassment based on lies. And thirdly, I know very well that my occasional laughing, smiling, and generally lighthearted demeanor throughout this video will be weaponized against me, and they will be taken out of context on several accounts to portray me as being unserious about and condescending towards these issues. I know that several segments of what I say here will be taken out of context for that purpose, and I also know that even when taken in their full context, my statements will be taken at face value and paraphrased as, essentially what she's saying is, and basically she's hiding behind her big words to hold almost no accountability for her actions, even if they were all comprehensively disproven or earnestly apologized for in this video, and even if my vocabulary simply does just come this naturally to me. But with all of that, I know that that will only put to light people's dedicated intention to ruthlessly beat me down no matter what, regardless of the truth, through the continued omission of context and the essentialist abstraction of what I say. And I know well that this video in its entirety is evidence enough as to why I deserve to laugh about the absurdity of it all. And with that, I have addressed all allegations according to the document. Now I will go on to say to the people who have supported me up to this point and wished me well all throughout, thank you so much, and thank you always. I wish that you knew how deeply I appreciate and value you for your patience, for your trust in the truth itself, and for your faith in me to say it. Thank you for having so compassionately defended me, even as mobs of people were vehemently trying to other you and demean your personhood as much as mine. Thank you to everyone who told me that this will all come to pass. Sincerely, I'm telling you this with so much love. Thank you, and thank you, always.